but we're going to shift a bit from yesterday. And what I would like to do today is talking from a regulatory part and business side. I think everyone here is a business person, involved in different levels. So what I think is interesting is to understand how people like us, business people, are looking at the regulatory part of the blockchain and crypto, and how we take that to our business, bearing in mind that we are a global business. And I think a very important thing is that first, if you look at the different regulatory bodies, so we are in Dubai at the moment, Middle East, there's different configurations according to the country where you're based, but most of our businesses are operating on a global basis, but we have always to look at the local base as well. And I think one of the interesting things happening right now in terms of crypto is that everyone is at least juggling between different regulatory bodies and trying to make sure that we are going according to the law. Because, for instance, if you look at the big scandals like the Tezos ICO and some others that have been happening, especially in the US. For instance, the US is probably the most hot potato in terms of blockchain crypto, but it's as well one big market. For instance, one question to start. Anyone here accept money from the US? Yeah, only one, okay, two. But for instance, are you accepting only from accredited investors, I would say, no? Yeah, so that's a very important thing. So I will try to see from the panel here, we have a fantastic panel. So we have Andrew Adcock, that was the previous, Maxim Chernov, that is coming from Moscow, which is interesting as well to see Moscow and Russia and all the areas around. Robert Hackett, and as well Andrew Adcock, which has probably the only ICO, or at least regulated entity, at least in this room. And I've been as well working in banking and finance, so I have kind of some thoughts about that. So I think that's the team that we have here. So I would start with a small presentation about each of you. If you could do the presentation, then I have a couple of questions to start.
Yeah, the microphone did work. Hello to everybody, good morning. I'm Maxim Chernov from Russia, from Moscow. I'm International Secretary of IDACB, which we created with more than 35 countries already, International Decentralized Association of Cryptocurrency and Blockchain. And actually our mission is to create a regulation for cryptocurrency and blockchain in different parts of the world. And we discussed that already in January. We set up altogether more than 30 countries, representatives, which actually association of every country and governmental representative of every country. So like Russia is represented by advisor of Mr. Putin, who's in charge of internet. So what's important, I guess, to discuss today, how the regulation should be created, because if we just do whatever we create in the crypto world, and it's not connected to real world, that there's nothing in it. Thank you.
Completely, very important point. So moving forward,
Sorry, yes.
Small introduction and a bit of how you context to your business regulatory part. Because you mentioned a lot of money and a lot of high-profile organizations.
Well, I think it's relevant now, especially in the charity world, where you can see visibly where the money is abused and the victims from it. So regulation is a huge part of it. However, the flip side to that is that you have to have something to regulate. So regulation should never, ever take away the spirit of entrepreneurship. So if you're creating a brand new, unique value proposition that serves the people in a compelling way that is undeniable, the regulation should not take that away from them. The regulation is there to make sure the product or service works. There are no, there are no fraudulent activities around there. There are no problems with the technology. That's for me what regulation is all about. Regulation is about being best in keeping the technology improving, keeping the service improving, keeping the product improving. A lot of people are talking about regulation now. The Bank of England recently talked about regulation, Mark Carney, and said we have to sort this Bitcoin thing out. That's literally his paraphrase. We have to sort this Bitcoin thing out, which really tells you that banks have no idea what Bitcoin is still, and they're getting their heads around it. So really, governments are really just trying to tax cryptocurrency. They're just trying to tax it. And in fact, the state of Arizona recently voted whether to accept cryptocurrency to pay the state tax. So these are really good things in the sense of that Bitcoin and other cryptos are becoming widely received as genuine and credible, as a way and a payment method for people to choose. But people are still scared that they're going to last and that they're sustainable. And I think putting a regulation stamp on it kind of gives that person peace of mind, in a way. That's my...
So one question for you before I go to the other one. So you've been doing big ICOs, or at least a lot of money on this. So for instance, on your particular case, because we can talk about the regulators, but we are business people, and I would like to focus on us, because I think we're not regulators, none of us here.
No.
So how do you do, for instance, just for the big, like you mentioned, $60 million, $100 million is quite a lot of money. So for instance, how do you make sure that you don't get in trouble? Because I think that's what the audience probably wants.
Well, I think the reason, really, the answer to that question is the blockchain, the technology that you are using is really the regulatory framework, because I'm pumping my assets on smart contracts into that blockchain, which means that my regulation is transparent. Those businesses are already existing. I've got restaurants all over the world that bring money in. So I'm not putting in a phantom product that might or might not work. The difference with me is I've already got 10 years, probably 15 years of hard work going into developing traditional businesses. Some of them have regulations, some of them don't need it. But in terms of quality control, that's already there.
Very good point. So moving to you, and I have some more questions afterwards.
So my name is Rupert Hacker. I've been working in this space for around 4 years, building retail exchange infrastructure for fiat cryptocurrency. So our primary exchanges are bitcoin.com.au, bitcoin.co.uk, bitcoin.ca, bitcoin.eu. Also set up Australia's first wholesale managed fund that's fully invested in crypto. Also got a board director seat of the Australian Digital Commerce Association. We've spent about 2 years interfacing with regulators, trying to get this agenda forward and get some type of understanding within the regulators and government towards this technology and its implications. And like Marco says, I think that some of the most important areas is really consumer protection and security, and that's really what needs to be focused on for regulators to create an environment that enables this technology to flourish.
So last but not least.
Yeah, certainly. I'm Andrew Adcock, Chief Marketing Officer and one of the co-founders of Crowd for Angels. We're a crowdfunding platform based in London, and we are regulated and authorised by the Financial Conduct Authority. So we offer regulated products. We've moved into this space, actually July of last year, offering a crypto payment gateway to solve the international transfer problem, bank fees that were rip-offs. And now we're running an ICO but linked to a bond. So again, it's a regulated product, but the token is not. Personally, I actually agree with Marco quite a lot. The UK, they're getting their heads around it for one purpose and one purpose only, to try and tax people. That's what governments do. They need to pay for services. So they're looking at how that can work in frameworks. But in terms of business models, I mean, it comes down to the EU rules, prospectus rules, compliance rules, data rules. There's lots of things you have to consider when doing an ICO, and not just think of it in a vacuum. And we're all trying to protect the consumer at the end of the day.
I also just add there that I think a lot of this regulation conversation has kind of lost the point. The whole point is blockchain technology.
Yeah, but the point, so right now probably bringing a bit of controversy, and I think we are part of this. So at the moment, and I'm going to present this afternoon, I'm going to mention some of the numbers. The world economy is around $80 trillion, and from $80 trillion we have around $200 to $300 trillion of debt. So $80 trillion of world economy, around $300 trillion of debt. The world Bitcoin cryptocurrency world at this moment today is $470 billion. At its peak was 700, close to $800 billion. So that means, but last year, not last year, 2016 was only 40 to 50 billion. So that means in 1 year it went from 40 billion to 700 billion. And probably this year is going to reach 1 trillion, which is a significant part of the world economy. And that's where it comes to the regulators and the governments. But the challenge I think all of us here in this room have is that we're doing something that is part blockchain, but part financial as well. Because we're touching money of investors. We cannot call it even official investors because tokens are not somehow financial instruments, at least considered by most of the governments. So the challenge, and I think that's the part that I would like to get us discussing is how can we leverage this part in an effective way. So I think you do in your case an international organization with governments. So for instance, I've been advising actually regulators from the UK. I have people in my team working with FCA, I work with Luxembourg, I work with Gibraltar, and I have some interesting people in Singapore. So for instance, these are some of the only regulators in the world that have some kind of consideration related with crypto. But then if you go in the UK, there's massive contradictions, like Mark Carney destroying Bitcoin yesterday or before yesterday, and as well one of the main people in Labour, Abbott, as well, saying Bitcoin is a scam. So we still have, first of all, a complete lack of knowledge about crypto, which is scary, because these people are supposed to managing us, or at least to run countries. And the other hand is people like us that are creating $1 trillion industry, and actually still in its early days. So I think the challenge is, how can we cope with this? Because we're not regulators, we're not supposed to be regulators, so at least us, we are supposed to be entrepreneurs, looking at technology, looking at solutions. So I would like to pass this, and probably, I think you mentioned a very good point, and I agree completely with you, Marco, in the sense that if you have a strong business, the business should speak for itself. But the point is that, of course, if you're having a business, it's like, if you do an IPO, you are putting a company public. But if you do an ICO, you are putting still a company public, but you do it through a coin offering, so creating another coin, another token, another somehow ecosystem. So I want to use a phrase from William Mogayo that I think is, every ICO is like a private economy. And I think that's probably, for me, it helps explaining what we have. But of course, one thing is what us business people think, the other thing is how we take this to the industry. So I'm passing this part of the nuances, because I think what will make us stronger, all of us here, is how we deal with the challenges without getting in trouble. And I think the devil's on details. And I think you mentioned the part, but I would like to see how each of us is dealing with this. First, in my case, just to finish, I'm actually dealing with probably one of the first ICOs with a novel medicine, and it's a massive project that I'm doing. So we decided to do it as an IPO, but an ICO. So we're going to be doing everything according to the law, but for instance, I know that no one actually has a clue. For instance, I hired one of the biggest legal firms in the world. I know more than they do, but I put their name in there. So then I go to the regulators, I try to engage them, and in one end I'm mitigating the risk, and actually I'm creating a security for my ICO. But I know that I can do this, I have some money, and I'm trying to do it right, but I know that most of the ICOs are small startups, they cannot afford to do this. So how do you deal with this? And starting probably with you, because you have a relationship with governments.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dennis. So first of all, some real examples. Like Marco said, I don't care how it's going to be with my coins and with my ICO if I have real business. But can you imagine that once you launch your ICO with your restaurant in some countries, your restaurants will be closed, just closed, together with your business. So you will, so the whole business will just be closed just due to ICO. And we have some such examples in different countries. And another example, like Robert, he's dealing with selling bitcoins in Australia. But if you try to sell in Russia, for example, bitcoins or Ethereum, doesn't matter, from your bank account, it will be blocked automatically. But that is not against the rules. So there is no rule in Russia that you cannot sell or buy bitcoins. It's just like generally percepted, and banks are afraid of it, and that's why they just block it. So they just say, I don't want to have you as a client, doesn't matter how big your business is. So that's actually a problem for lots of businesses, because they don't know how to react on it. But I'll say here one thought, which I understood through talking a lot with governments. Governments in the world are afraid of cryptocurrency. That's just one point. Governments are afraid. And as far as they're afraid, they don't know how to react. And what we decided is to be our mission as IDECB, we need just to talk. Open the conversation, open the discussion. Doesn't matter, you're afraid, that's good. Why? Tell me what you mean by cryptocurrency and what you mean by crypto asset and how you accept ICO. And is ICO good for economy? So would you like some money to come to you? Like, for example, in some countries, you don't have a lot of investors, but if you make an ICO, you'll get money into economy. So again, talking about Russia, we have more than 1,000 ongoing ICOs now. But most of them, like, not the most, but the majority of them, that doesn't have Russian jurisdiction. just because if you have Russian jurisdiction, your bank account will be blocked. Why do you need it? So it's easily to do it on Malta, on Gibraltar, in BVI, somewhere else, but not in your home country. So that means that if you're a regulator, look at the ICE regulator. So there are some problems for you as well. So look, you're a Minister of Finance, and some unknown crypto wallet with the estimated value of $500 billion could interfere your economy easily. So you just open the border for this crypto wallet, and they will let you. That's it. So that's the threat. So if we create some transparent mechanism for real world communication, like regulation, that will increase both efficiency of crypto wallet, and that will give some floor to real world as well. And so in that case, your restaurants will not be closed. Is it a good point?
It's a good point. My restaurants have never been closed because everyone needs to eat, right? What I will come back to the main point again of the origin of this fear. A lot of people in the world from the old school government regulation banks are afraid of their rice bowl being taken away. So in Asia, rice bowl means they're living, right? So I was talking last week at the Islamic banking blockchain event, and all I saw in that room was fear. That was it. Fear. And that gap between fear and can I make money from it and tax it is a huge gap still. A huge gap still. And the other thing I want to mention is that, of course, education is what it's all about. And if you can find a way that you can see that governments can benefit from it, because, you know, one part of regulation is, well, the regulator would say, this coin or this company is an approved blockchain user of this particular blockchain. In fact, the blockchain needs to be the regulators as a standard. That would be universal across the board. So if people said, right, they're using Ethereum, ERC 777, whatever it is, and it's proven, then that gives people peace of mind. It's not just regulatory, it's actually perception, a lot of the case. But again, blockchain needs to be educated. If you ask everybody in the street what the hell is blockchain, nobody can give you a straight answer. They don't know what the hell it is, right? They only know about Bitcoin. One of the strategies for me is starting a charity on a blockchain, because I wanted to really disrupt the whole of an industry in terms of proving to people that charity is the most abused industry in the world. And if I could create a blockchain charity, I could disrupt the hell out of everything and prove to people that blockchain is actually very important. And it can actually save lives directly because of that technology, and that has to be prevalent in the regulatory framework. Like, for example, do you give to charity using blockchain? It doesn't have to be big love, but are you donating to charity using blockchain? Are you helping your local community? And in terms of democracy, we all know it's true. People know in the world that governments are not effective in running countries, right? You know, everyone's split on governments because they don't represent the people. They don't represent what the people want, they don't represent what the people aspire to, they don't work, they're too expensive, etc., etc. Blockchain is the start of a movement of total democracy. That's the deal. And that's the big question and the big challenge here, right, that we could move into. For me, the charity is, for me, that's what I could do personally in my resources is what I could do. And I put all my resources into that charity because actually I could actually help people directly straight away instead of worrying about bloody regulations, worrying about tax and worrying about government. Because if I can give a house to someone in your country for free, how are they going to feel? Is it going to change their life? Of course. How's the government going to feel about that? Well, I believe the government will come on board with that very quickly because they can see that they can actually use that blockchain technology in their own housing issues in their own country. So that's really my answer to that question.
So I've been working with the Australian Transaction Reporting Commission for the last 2 years. On April the 3rd, they're actually enacting into law a digital currency exchange license. This makes the activity of trading cryptocurrencies a primary business activity illegal without coming under the regulation. The primary challenge is that peer-to-peer digital currency really doesn't understand regulators' permission. As a result, if I want to transfer someone $1 million in this room, it doesn't require AUSTRAC or any other government regulatory body's permission. What this in turn creates is actually just an artificial cost on centralized services. This pushes peer-to-peer systems to be a cost-effective model. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges when speaking to regulators, is basically they're paid to understand the existing paradigm and try to put something within that. This is the equivalent of Uber for finance, where you can ride share, Airbnb, all these new systems of collective commons. The principle of digital currency, what the technology enables, is peer-to-peer finance. This is one of the primary concerns that I have, is that these types of conversations are very, very early days, and current regulators are kind of fearful of those types of conversations.
Just to add on to that before I forget, because I'm a bit old now. What you do, in essence, with the regulator is you're actually creating another middleman. And the whole point of blockchain is not to have a middleman. You know, we've got to overcome this.
I'll go
really.
there. So let's go.
You know, it's funny because all points are quite valid. And, you know, the FCA are good in the sense that they allow things to grow before usually releasing a note and then acting on the note 12 months later, so they don't just step on your head. But from a business nuance point, a couple of things we had to watch out for, I think it's really important, is first of all, prospectus rules. If you're in the EU, you can only raise a maximum of £5 million from retail clients. That's anybody less than €100,000 investment. And obviously, tons of ICOs just, you know, fall foul of this rule. So that's one thing I think lots of people miss, is this difference between a retail investor and an angel investor above 100,000. But as well, what came in only 10 days ago, and it's been the bane of my existence at the moment, is MiFID II. And one rule in MiFID II that's really a pain is that any risk warning on a financial promotion has to be the same font size as your main text. Now, in a big brochure, that's not a problem, but a lot of us are digital advertisers will be familiar with the 300 by 250 pixel ad. Try and put a risk warning on that. It is difficult. It doesn't suit the environment, it doesn't suit the web, and I think it's a step too far. But those are two sort of nuances I think everybody should pay attention to. Prospect rules and MiFID II, the little thing about risk warnings being the same size as main text.
Yeah, so a lot of interesting points, and we have 9 minutes now, so I just want to highlight a couple of things and then pass probably for the last one and then pass to the public because we don't have more time. So I think a lot of the things we mentioned here is the central versus decentralized models, which is a critical element that we cannot solve ourselves. But I think going forward, of course, the centralized models are becoming bigger somehow than centralized models, but we'll go there. Then risk management, and I think that's the most important thing for us as individuals and as business people. The education, for instance, I think the education is critical because people on the main street don't really understand what is blockchain, but actually people in the governments, people in the regulators don't have a clue. And trust me, I created the bank and I've been involved in banking. That's the part that I'm scared, to be honest. I'm more scared about that. Then the financial industry, for instance, you mentioned a very good point. It's, for instance, I've been advising major banks worldwide, and the same bank that I'm advising, the CEO or multi-billion banks, they ask me for advice, but then when I go with my company that is touching crypto, they block my bank accounts, which is another schizophrenic approach, but this is happening. I'm sure some of you have the same challenge. And for instance, I have a case of one of the companies I'm involved that they changed the name and they fool around the bank department and they open an account, which is another thing that is completely ridiculous. And then, of course, then we have players that are offering solutions on that level. Then I think the most important thing for all of us here is the governance. And I think you mentioned different ways of looking at this. And for instance, in theory, blockchain can disrupt the entire global economy. Actually, I'm writing a book, but it can actually create other problems, because if you create a closed blockchain, you can create a dictatorship quite significant. But the challenge is that how do you do governance with technology? We have the DAO. I think everyone heard about the DAO that was hacked, and the $60 million were taken out of the investment. So we have the challenge of the governance that has to start with us. but the technology in itself is made by us. So that's always a contradiction on that. And then the peer-to-peer business models, and of course the regulatory part. So I think the challenge that the last 2 years, the ICO model and the crypto world, and that's why we cannot separate, or actually even the US regulators admitted that you cannot separate the Bitcoin or the crypto from the blockchain. And this is another thing, because some regulators say, yes, blockchain is good, crypto is bad. It's not so black and white. So I think to finish this and try to wrap up, because we don't have a lot of time, how can we manage this, and I think coming up with concrete solutions, because I think for me it's all, I'm not a regulator, I might advise some of them, but I want my business to be solid. How can we take this? And of course in my part of the governance is that I'm trying to write, and independent of blockchain is, me and my partners have to agree. If you don't agree, we write something, and if you don't agree with, we just separate, like a divorce. But it's better to write down things. How can we do this as entities? And of course, looking at all the different things that we've been talking about.
I think it is. So first of all, I think that we need to transfer our experience through our countries. Because lots of good happens in different parts of the world, and sometimes you just don't know it. Or you have wrong perception. Like yesterday I told some examples, like who knows about crypto rubles? Like everybody knows about it, but it's fake. So government didn't want to do it. So we knew and we know lots of fake news from newspapers, and we don't have a real examples exchange. Because the media wants some hot. They're not interested in some just real examples, but some hot examples. And then, of course, so what we thought when we sat down as 35 countries all together, we thought what should be like real examples in what spheres. And that is like education, for example. You talk about it. We have Indian Blockchain Academy in India, which is a good example how it should be organized. It's spread all the India states, so people can easily just download and watch it and study it. And that can be shared model as well. As for ICOs, for example, they are a good example how to attract money. So if you tell to the government that it's the way to attract money to your economy, and that's obviously whoever in the government, they want to do it. Like, again, these problems with cryptocurrency, like exchanges and buying, I have a good example of our friends, which is Bundle Network. I just wanted to show it. They solved the question, like, there are lots of different exchanges, and they believe to one or another exchange is the question, and liquidity on every exchange is the question. So if you want to trade on different exchanges, you need to have 30, 40 accounts on different exchanges. Instead of it, you need to have just one trustable. If you have one trustable and you can afford, like, that blockchain allows it easily. So there are plenty of technologies which can be easily implemented if we just know it. Like Rupert model in Australia, he can sell bitcoins in newspaper shops.
Good idea.
Thank you. Banks, medicine, logistics, telecommunications. So we'll bring real banks, real hospitals, real telecom companies with blockchain projects in one panel discussion, in one rooms, from 10 different directions for 2 days. What we hope to do, we want them to see each other, to know each other. Like for example, if you come to a fintech forum, know a fintech forum, you'll find lots of banks. No one blockchain project, and that's strange. That's weird.
Because it's not weird.
Well, but it's.
We know why.
Yeah. But But you know, there are some banks who are open to new technologies. Let's cooperate with those who are ready. We should not persuade those who are not ready. They will be persuaded by life, whether disappear from economy or something happens. But let's cooperate with those who are ready. Let's bring them all together. Let's make a cooperation. So 19th has been on this platform. I ask everybody, if you want to come to Moscow World Blockchain Cryptocurrency Summit to Live Investment, 19th, 20th May, we are trying to do this. We'll bring all together and we'll try blockchain economy to tackle the real economy and to deal it. Thank you very much.
I'm going to ask a very disruptive question now. Do they have regulatory conversations about controlling the stock market?
So do they want to control?
Much bigger one with that one.
Are they having conversations in the stock market on how to regulate themselves? No. Are they regulated? Not really. Right? Why was Bitcoin started? As a reaction to a subprime crisis of complete freaking deregulation. The only way this is going to be solved is something called money. Market share now in crypto is $500 billion. The whole capital market is $200 trillion. When crypto reaches the sense of 50 trillion, right, then you're going to get different conversations where if you can't beat them, join them. And there are conspiracy theories saying that Bitcoin was started by the elite. It was not Satoshi Nakamoto, because the Bitcoin white paper is so bloody perfect, it's never been hacked or taken down, and it's the new debt system to replace the fiat debt system. So I can go all day long about this, because this conversation we're having now is a little bit ridiculous, because really, the banks are not having the same conversations. The only thing's happening is that banks now can take your savings of, say, $1,000, they can leverage them 68 times and play with them on the stock market. Right? Blockchain is not about that. Blockchain is against that. Right? And that's what we should be discussing, not just how to regulate it.
Yeah, but it's much more complex. So let's finish this, because I understand where you're going, but then we will become more radical in the approach, because you need to look at the real world as well.
I'm just starting from where this started in the first place.
I think everyone agrees partly, but it's how do you leverage that in the real world? So Rupert, just to finalize.
You know, I think it touches on an interesting point. I think it's something that's really not talked or discussed much in the cryptocurrency space, is the concept of the association of money and governance. And really what you see is that who controls money will then be governed through monetary policy. I think this is what the real advent of cryptocurrency enables, is the rapid evolution of monetary policy through the advent of newer cryptocurrencies. I think that this is something that's really changes the political economic landscapes of the future, and allows for us to create a society that actually gives value to citizens or users of that currency. I think that the other big kind of dormant thing which isn't discussed on a regulatory level is actually security and consumer protection. So as we saw in 2014, when Mt. Gox lost 800,000 Bitcoins, that caused a complete crash in the market. Yet no country is talking about what should happen as a security standard for exchanges. It's all based on how do we capture 100 points of ID using an existing system that doesn't really apply to this new tech. That's my two big points for the future.
Very big ones.
Yeah, I'll be very short, and I'll just focus on ICOs, because obviously there's a lot of ICOs in the room. But the rule of thumb is really simple. Whatever jurisdiction you are operating out of, look at a financial promotion rules in that jurisdiction and follow them. Collecting data, presenting risk warnings, and just putting a fair and proper offer to investors. That'll probably stop you from going to jail.
And the other thing I can add here, you have to look at the bank's appetite, the hedge fund's appetite. I get calls that I've never had before in 30 years of doing business last year. Are you Marco? I said, yeah. Do you know about ICOs? Your name is coming up all the time. I said, yeah. We're a hedge fund, we do IPOs. IPOs are dead. We want to do ICOs. Get in our office now. We want to know how it's done, right? The appetite from hedge funds are get the money into ICOs, because an IPO takes 6 years, an ICO takes 30 days, right? So trust me, guys, the ICO, the crypto and the blockchain market is going to grow unbelievably fast in the next 2 years to 100 trillion, I think. Seriously, you know, it's just going to go nuts.
So, well, I think we all agree, and actually, to be honest, the ICO industry already passed the VC industry in terms of value, so that's a fact. So passing questions, because there's a lot of topics that you could go for hours, so there's one over there. We finish our time, but I think we have time at least for 2 or 3 questions. This deserves. I'll just pass my microphone.
Hi, thanks for the question. So basically, we were talking about the non-regulation of the stock market, and I think what we could attribute that to, I don't know if you guys saw the inverse VIX a couple of weeks ago, went from like $150 down to $5, $150 billion market cap down to $5 billion, instantly got shut overnight. So my question is for you guys, as we talk about regulation, as it becomes more widely adopted cryptocurrencies, do you think that there's going to be a blind eye kind of by the SEC the same way there was for instruments like the inverse VIX? And that goes to Marco.
That goes to me.
Yeah.
I get the easy questions. Well, let's put that in perspective. There has always been a blind eye where there's been a huge agenda. So when Bill Clinton was voted into power, part of his manifesto was he wants every American to own their own home. And he asked the investment banks, well, how do you do that? So the investment bank says we deregulate, we create CDO, put subprime mortgages in there, take the risk off the subprime banks, everyone gets a loan, we don't check anybody, blah, 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 blind eye, right? So blind eye is all about money. So yes, there will be blind eyes, absolutely. You know and I know.
But also we should mention that at the same time, it's good that cryptocurrency is not regulated yet, because it would be another part of the story. If it were over-regulated, we couldn't even do it. We couldn't launch ICO, we couldn't do all this the exchanges, cryptocurrency.
Blockchain is the regulation because it can't, if it's a good blockchain, it cannot be hacked.
Yeah,
it can't be hacked.
So the point is that as far as it is not regulated yet, it's also good. So in that's fair, because like, if the government doesn't know, if they don't know how to regulate it, that's good. Let it in. To over-regulate is badly than to not to have regulation.
Let me give you some perspective here.
Yeah.
When you pay your tax bill, do they give you an itemized receipt bill of where it goes?
No.
Which means every government is corrupt. Right? That's the test. Okay? And until that meets the public's requirement for information, there will always be corruption. They're frightened of blockchain because blockchain can cure that problem in seconds. So that's part of the resistance here, you know.
But that's one thing. So that's just one thing. It'll pass to you. I think very important. I don't want to go into polemic because I think we agree, but I think the challenge is as well that blockchain is still an ongoing baby. Okay, and as a baby can become a monster or can become a great body. So I think it depends as well what we're going to be doing on that.
I mean, the positive thing is that Estonia is entirely run on blockchain.
Yeah,
does everyone know that?
Behind that? But Estonia is a small country.
Small, but it's still a country.
It is. No, it's a good example, positive example. But you have other challenges. So passing to another question.
So, this is for everyone, and particularly Marco. My name is Samson. I'm from the United States. I live in Washington, D.C., and so I was sitting here hearing the conversation. We have the preamble of the Constitution. It says, "We the people of these United States in order to form a more perfect union for safety, for government." So when you're talking about replacing the dollar, I guess my basic first question is, when will cryptos be a nation state, and how will cryptos provide healthcare, police, and safety rules for flying?
That's a very hard
Can you repeat the? I didn't quite get. What was the question?
How are you going to provide public services when you replace fiat?
So mostly, how do you, if we decentralize everything, how do you provide the basic systems of society? That's the problem with libertarians and blockchain, because the question is, so if you deregulate everything and you get blockchain total, how do you provide still the basic problems?
That's great, because you liberate all the funds that go into the wrong pockets, and therefore your infrastructure becomes a lot better.
Yeah, but But then I can say as well, and provoking and passing to the rest of the people, is that not everyone knows how to trade, not everyone is self-sustainable, and a huge part of society, so there's around 3 billion people in society that are living with less than $2 per day.
Well, why is that?
Well, that's a much bigger question.
Well, that's a very political answer, you know? I mean, the point is that still 1% of the world control, well, is it 20% of the world control all of the wealth in the world? 1% control 78% of the wealth in the world, something like that. 98% of the world retire financially broke, right? That is a broken down education system. It does not serve the population at all. It teaches them to be slaves or enslaved to work in a job that don't exist. It does not teach them to be empowered and embraced with new technology at all.
So I agree with you, and I'm just going to give you back the microphone on the stage. If you have questions about doing ICOs, our regulations in the U.S., come find me. Because the U.S. is moving towards innovation, but at the end of the day, you also have to align how will ICOs, our cryptocurrencies, work in the real world, because we go back to the tragedies of the commons. Because there's a reason there's a global north and a global south, and America is one of them.
I agree, and I think it's a good point. And I would say that cryptocurrency is a reaction from people that are basically pissed off with having no money. Because decentralization let me finish what I'm saying. Decentralization is one of the only ways with encrypted digital currency of when anyone can actually create wealth for themselves. That's a major point, guys. It's been missed a little bit.
No, I think we all understand, but there's a lot of manipulation in crypto. Come on, there's a lot of whales putting
There's
money.
manipulation everywhere.
I know, but I'm not defending. Just
Look at the stock market. Is that not manipulated?
Completely. but the regulation is not done to destroy people. But well, I was just passing to both of you. You didn't mention that, they'll probably wrap up because
Actually, going back to that question, Marco had a point earlier about the receipts. You know,
Yes.
when you put something, and actually that answers Samsung's question really nicely. That, you know, if you took hundreds of years ago, no one had debit cards. Now we've got debit cards and the web, and this does everything. Going forwards, the blockchain technology is the fundamental point, isn't it? Regardless of the crypto, you know, if you take all cryptos away and come to some sort of currency, it's just a value exchange. But the main thing is it's transparent. Everybody sees it. Everybody can, you know, track it, look at it.
What people are afraid of is the truth, because they're going to get found out, and that's the case with these charities, with Oxfam giving the donations to prostitutes, the head of UNICEF fiddling with the staff, sexually abusing the staff. People want the truth. People are fed up being lied to, manipulated. That's the whole point of this
I think
movement.
we all agree on that, but the challenge is how to get into reality.
That's why we're here today. You're leading it.
Yeah, I think universal basic income and distributed autonomous organizations. And I think if we can create a society with a higher level of integrity and trust in organizations, and that's principally what blockchain technology does. Beyond that, we've got a huge ecosystem that's constantly evolving. So with over 1,200, 1,500 cryptocurrencies to choose from, if we were to think very futuristic about, you know, if one was to become a major nation or a, you know, global currency, so to speak, let's hope that it's one that actually provides a better alternative to the one we have today.
I think we can wrap up with that. We could go for more, so I think we've run out of time. Well, thank you everyone. It's a great topic. I think we all agree.